When Ivy Dane stepped into the Callahan estate for the first time, she didn't expect to feel anything. Not the cold marble under her heels, not the chill in the air, and certainly not the sharp tug of curiosity when a smooth, teasing voice drifted down the staircase. "Are you the new assistant?" She looked up. A man, tall, effortlessly handsome, dressed in a casual navy sweater, descended with a kind of quiet confidence that suggested charm came as naturally to him as breathing. She quirked a brow. "I'm not anyone's assistant." "Good," he said with a lopsided grin. "Because I'm terrible at keeping appointments." The banter was light, flirtatious, until the moment shattered. "Ah, I see you've met my wife," a clipped voice echoed from behind. Henry Callahan, commanding and composed, stepped between them. The man Asher froze. His smile faltered. "Wife." Ivy swallowed hard as realization flickered in his eyes. The spark that had ignited seconds ago turned to static tension. This was going to be a problem. Have you ever fallen for someone at exactly the wrong moment? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more unforgettable love stories. Ivy had married Henry Callahan for reasons that had little to do with love. Their whirlwind romance was more of a merger than a marriage. 3 months after meeting through a luxury design contract, she said "I do" in an art gallery. Not for the romance, but for what Henry could offer. Stability, connections, protection from the loneliness she'd buried beneath years of professional perfection. It wasn't love. And she was okay with that. Until she met his son. Asher was everything Henry wasn't. Warm, emotionally available, and disarmingly sincere. A pianist studying music therapy. He had a quiet intensity that saw beyond the roles people played. He asked questions with his eyes, not his mouth. And worst of all, he made Ivy feel seen. Which terrified her. She'd spent years building walls high enough to keep disappointment out. Now, a 24-year-old grad student was cracking them open with nothing but melody and stolen glances. Each day the house grew smaller. Every step she took through its long corridors brought her closer to something she shouldn't want. And someone she could never have. Their moments were brief. A shared silence in the music room. A glance over breakfast. The whisper of a melody through a closed door. But something was building. Slowly, quietly, dangerously. And Ivy. She wasn't sure if she was falling. Or finally waking up. Because when love doesn't knock but slips in through the cracks, it's almost impossible to keep out. Especially when it wears the face of the one person you're supposed to avoid. Would you walk away from a feeling that feels like fate? Or step closer, knowing it could ruin everything? This is Step by Step. Into My Heart. A story of forbidden connection, quiet longing, and the slow unraveling of two hearts who weren't looking for each other, but found something neither of them knew they needed. Stay with us. The story is just beginning. The Callahan estate was a masterpiece of cold modernism. Clean lines, steel beams, and polished concrete floors. But beneath its striking elegance was a silence so thick Ivy Dane could hear her own heartbeat when she moved. She'd only been living there a week. Every morning, Henry left early. Meetings, negotiations, mergers. Their interactions had dwindled from polite smiles to awkward nods. He didn't ask how she was settling in. He didn't ask much of anything anymore. The marriage, if one could call it that, already felt like a well-tailored costume hanging on a hook. Presentable, hollow, and never quite warm. But Ivy wasn't here for love. She'd told herself that over and over. Love was unpredictable, dangerous. Henry offered structure, safety, and an escape from years of chaos. Her firm was finally getting the elite projects it had always deserved. Her face now appeared in high-end design magazines. The marriage was a strategic partnership. Cold maybe, but calculated. What she hadn't calculated was his son. Sure. That name sat on her tongue like something sweet she wasn't supposed to taste. Since their first awkward meeting, she had tried to avoid him. But avoidance was nearly impossible when they shared the same corridors, the same meals, and, on certain nights, the same stillness. She heard him before she ever saw him again. Late one night, after another glass of wine failed to lull her into sleep, Ivy wandered down the hallway in silk slippers. A gentle, haunting piano melody floated through the air, drawing her toward the music room like a moth to a quiet flame. She paused just outside the door, careful not to breathe too loudly. Inside, Asher sat at the grand piano, his back to her. His fingers moved fluidly over the keys. Delicate, passionate, controlled chaos. It wasn't classical. It was original, honest. A melody that crawled under her skin and stayed. She didn't realize her hand had reached for her leather-bound sketchbook until her fingers were already tracing him. His posture, the slight tilt of his head, the way one foot tapped subtly against the floor. He turned just a little. Not enough to see her, but enough to know. Neither of them spoke. She closed the sketchbook gently and tiptoed back to her room, heart pounding in rhythms the piano couldn't explain. The next morning at breakfast, the silence between them was no longer awkward. It was taut. Electric. "Sleep well?" he asked, glancing at her over the rim of his coffee cup. "Eventually," she said. "You?" "Eventually," he echoed, eyes steady. "Sometimes it helps to play." She blinked. "Play what?" He just smiled like he already knew she had been listening. Over the following weeks, their encounters grew, frequent and dangerously normal. She found herself lingering in the sunroom if she heard him nearby. He'd make excuses to pass through the kitchen when she was making tea. Their conversations danced between surface-level politeness and emotional near-misses. "You're always sketching," he said once, nodding at her ever-present book. "It helps me process," she replied. "Designs, emotions, life. Do I get a page?" She froze, then smirked. "You'll have to earn it." That made him laugh. A real belly-deep laugh. It was the kind of sound that made you want to believe in something reckless. Then came the accident. Ivy had insisted on redesigning the Callahan garden herself. A symbolic act of taking root, perhaps, in a place that never quite felt like hers. While adjusting a stepping stone near the koi pond, her foot slipped. Her ankle twisted sharply beneath her, and she let out a soft cry. Asher appeared out of nowhere, shirt damp with sweat from his jog, curls slightly disheveled, concern written across his face. "You okay?" he asked, kneeling beside her. She tried to push herself up but winced. "Twisted it." He gently took her foot in his hands. "You need ice. And elevation. And an ego transplant." He chuckled. "Don't worry. Happens to the best of us." He lifted her, effortlessly, and carried her inside. That was the first time she saw the real him. Close. Skin to skin. That was also the moment she felt the first betrayal of her body. Because as his arms wrapped around her, as her head rested against his chest, her heart betrayed her logic. She wanted more of him. And she wasn't supposed to. On the couch, he wrapped her ankle in ice and started talking. About his mother. About growing up in the shadows of ambition. About Henry. "I respect him," Asher said, voice low. "But sometimes I wonder if he knows how to love anything that doesn't come with a portfolio." Ivy stayed silent. But her silence said everything. Asher looked at her. "You don't have to stay, you know." She looked down at her sketchbook, fingers tightening around it. "It's complicated." His voice softened. "Maybe not as much as you think." They sat like that for a long time, surrounded by tension, unsaid things, and piano keys that hadn't been touched since he played for her in the dark. Then came the gala. Henry insisted she wear the red gown. It had been delivered weeks earlier, and Asher had unknowingly helped her choose it during a chance encounter at the boutique. "You'll make an impression," Henry had said. She did. But not in the way he'd expected. The moment Ivy entered the ballroom, every eye turned, including Asher's. His gaze lingered. It wasn't lust. It was something deeper. When the music began, Henry stepped away to speak with a client. Asher approached. "Dance?" he asked. She hesitated, scanning the room for her husband. But something in Asher's eyes made her nod. They danced, slowly, effortlessly, as if the world melted beneath their feet. No one spoke. Not until the last note faded and Henry's cold voice sliced through the air. I see the rumors are writing themselves. Ivy stepped back. So did Asher. The spell shattered. But the damage had been done. Later that night the confrontation came. Henry cornered her in the hallway. You enjoy embarrassing me. You enjoy using people, she snapped. His eyes narrowed. You and my son. Nothing has happened, she said firmly. That night she packed her things. Asher found her in the foyer. You're leaving. She nodded. I can't stay where I'm nothing more than leverage. Ivy. His voice cracked, but he didn't finish. He didn't stop her. She didn't ask him to. But the silence that followed was deafening. Ivy moved into a small apartment above her design studio. She painted her bedroom a shade of blue she called detached. She filled her vases with dried eucalyptus. She played his lullabies on repeat without realizing it was him. Still and soft, her favorite anonymous composer. Asher stayed in the house with his father, though their relationship was never the same. He tried to focus on grad school, on music, but everything he played sounded like her. One morning, he found her sketchbook among his things. Forgotten. Folded open to a page with a pressed marigold. And next to it, a penciled drawing of the music room. She had sketched him, head bowed, fingers on keys. In the margin, I listen for you even when I shouldn't. Asher's breath hitched. He closed the book and reached for his coat. It was time. Can love grow in places it shouldn't? Would you follow your heart, even when it leads you into the forbidden? Tell us in the comments and be sure to subscribe for the next chapter of this slow-burn romance. Rain slicked the pavement in silver sheets as Asher stood outside Ivy's apartment door, soaked to the bone but not caring. The sketchbook was clutched tightly in his hand. Lifeline. Confession. A message written in pressed flowers and secret glances. He hesitated before knocking. He hadn't seen her since the night she left. He didn't know what he would say, only that the silence between them had become unbearable. The door creaked open. Ivy stood in a white tee and flannel pajama pants, barefoot, her hair down and slightly mussed. Her eyes widened the moment she saw him. Asher. His lips parted. You forgot this. He held up the sketchbook. She stared at it. Him. I didn't forget, she whispered. He stepped inside without asking, raindrops trailing in his wake. I found the drawing, he said softly. The one of the music room. Ivy's fingers curled around the hem of her shirt. And the marigold, he added, voice lower now. You pressed it next to that lullaby. Her breath caught. I knew it was you, she admitted. Still and soft. I recognized your chords the first night I heard them. Asher exhaled like a weight had been peeled off his chest. I wrote that song the day you walked into the house, he said. I didn't know who you were. Only that something about you echoed. They stood there, inches apart, every heartbeat louder than thunder. I tried to stop thinking about you, Ivy murmured. Tried to stay in my lane. But every time I turned around, there you were, kind, curious, impossible. He stepped closer. You think I didn't try, he said, his voice like warm silk. You were married to my father. You were off limits. But God, Ivy. He reached up, brushing a damp strand of hair from her cheek. I fell for you before I even knew your name. They didn't kiss that night. Not yet. Instead they talked. 4 hours. About the first time they noticed each other. About the music, the garden, the quiet dinners filled with unsaid things. Ivy confessed how she'd felt like a possession in Henry's house, not a partner. Asher admitted he'd stayed so long under his father's roof out of guilt, not love. And in those shared truths they found safety. The kind of safety that doesn't beg for grand gestures, just gentle truths spoken in vulnerable tones. Over the next few weeks, something shifted. Asher started dropping by Ivy's apartment more often, sometimes with coffee, sometimes with new sheet music, always with intention. They'd sit on her couch, their knees almost touching, laughing over obscure piano references and childhood memories. Ivy showed him her pressed flower pages, each one marked with a memory she was afraid to forget. He played her lullabies that had never been heard by anyone else. Their connection deepened, unhurried but undeniable. Still, they hadn't crossed the final line. Not because they didn't want to, because they respected it too much. One Sunday, Asher surprised her with a day trip outside the city. "I want to show you something," he said. They drove 2 hours north to a quiet lake surrounded by pine trees. A private music therapy retreat was being built there, a pilot program Asher had helped design for trauma recovery. "It's not finished yet," he said, guiding her through the space. "But it's the first place I felt like I could breathe on my own." Ivy looked around. The wooden beams, the open windows, the grand piano waiting in the center of the main room. "It's beautiful," she whispered. He turned to her. "So are you." And just like that, the moment folded in on itself. Their lips met. Slow, searching. Years of restraint melted into a single tender kiss that felt like truth unraveling. It wasn't hurried. It wasn't heated. It was reverent, like they were afraid the moment might vanish if they held on too tight. "I'm not going back," Ivy said afterward. To him. To any of that. "I don't want you to," Asher replied, brushing his thumb across her hand. "I want you here with me." But peace never lingers for long. Especially when secrets still linger in the shadows. 1 week later, Ivy received a letter from Henry's lawyer. A clause in their prenup stated that if she was romantically linked to anyone during their first year of marriage, even separated, she would forfeit all design royalties from the Callahan estate renovations. The renovations were worth millions. Her life's work. She showed the letter to Asher that night. "He planned this," she said, pacing. "He knew. He always knew." "He's trying to punish you," Asher said, jaw tight. "For leaving him. For choosing yourself. For choosing you." They locked eyes. "I won't let him take your career from you," Asher said. "You built that. You earned it." "But if I fight him," she whispered, "it becomes public. It becomes a scandal." Asher walked toward her, cupping her face. "Let them talk. Let the headlines scream. We know what's real. We know what this is." She leaned into his palm. "I'm scared, Asher." "So am I," he said softly. "But I'd rather face the storm with you than weather silence alone." That night Ivy made a decision. She would go public, not with a tell-all interview but with her work. She accepted a major magazine feature that spotlighted female architects reclaiming spaces they were once excluded from. When asked about the Callahan estate, she spoke honestly but gracefully. "It was a professional milestone," she said, "but the real design that changed my life was learning how to rebuild myself." Then came the gala. Yes, another one. This time, hosted by the very firm that had once blacklisted her when she left Henry. Ivy arrived in midnight blue, hair pinned in soft waves, confidence radiating from her every step. Asher joined her, hand in hand. The moment their fingers linked in front of the photographers, the silence in the room snapped like brittle glass. Whispers bloomed. So did the truth. They didn't pretend. They didn't hide. They simply existed. Together. And that was the loudest love story the room had ever seen. Later that evening, Ivy spotted Henry standing across the room, drink in hand, face unreadable. She didn't flinch. She walked over. "This wasn't about hurting you," she said, calm and measured. "It was about choosing not to hurt myself anymore." He said nothing. But his silence spoke volumes. She turned and walked away, never looking back. The next morning Ivy received a call. The foundation Asher had been working with, one that supported emotional healing through art and music, wanted to collaborate with her on a new flagship therapy center. A space for trauma survivors to reconnect with creativity and find community. "You're the perfect fit," the director said. "You know how to make spaces breathe again." Ivy stared at the phone after the call ended, heart pounding. She knew exactly what she wanted to call it. Step by step. Into my heart. One evening weeks later, Ivy found Asher at her piano, playing a new piece. She stood quietly, watching the curve of his back, the way his fingers danced. When he finished, she stepped forward, pressed her sketchbook into his hands. He opened it. Inside, a fresh marigold, a new drawing of them in the garden, and a note. This love didn't happen all at once. It bloomed, step by step. He looked up. She was smiling through soft tears. He kissed her, soft, sure, and full of promises. This time there was no turning back. Do you believe love can grow from forbidden roots? Would you risk everything to follow your heart? Tell us below. And if this story moved you, like, comment, and subscribe for the breathtaking final act. The air in Ivy's studio was filled with the scent of fresh paint, sunlight, and lavender tea. Blueprints were spread across the marble table, early renderings of the music therapy center slowly coming to life, just like the woman overseeing it. Ivy stood near the window, watching the clouds shift over the skyline. For the first time in years she felt still. But peace didn't mean perfection. Not yet. Because while her life was finally hers again, one part still remained unspoken, something she'd kept buried beneath professionalism and progress. Love. Real, terrifying, breathtaking love. She hadn't seen Asher in 3 weeks. Not since the gala. Not since he kissed her hand, looked into her eyes and whispered, "No more hiding." Then he disappeared. No text. No midnight calls. No piano music at her door. She told herself he needed space, or maybe time to process everything. But deep down, her heart knew something wasn't right. Until the knock. It was gentle, hesitant. She opened the door. There he was, hair tousled, fingers ink-stained, dark circles under his eyes. "Asher," she breathed. "Hi," he said, managing a tired smile. He held out a rolled-up sheet of music. "I wrote something." Her heart stumbled. "For me." "For the center," he said, then added softly. "But mostly for you." He stepped inside. Laid the sheet on her piano. "I've been overwhelmed," he confessed, avoiding her gaze. "Not with you. With the weight of doing this right." She waited, saying nothing, letting silence invite truth. "My father sent me a letter," he continued. "Told me I was ruining the family name. Said I'd regret chasing a woman broken enough to marry him." Ivy's chest tightened. "And for a second," Asher whispered, "I let his voice in. I let him plant doubt." She turned toward him, lips trembling. "You don't have to explain." "I do," he said, stepping closer. "Because I walked away from the one thing in my life that felt real. And I hate myself for it." Her eyes shimmered. "Then why are you here?" He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out the sketchbook. Her sketchbook. Flipping it open, he pointed to a page she hadn't shown anyone. A drawing of Ivy and Asher sitting beneath the willow tree in the garden, their fingers just barely touching. Below it she had written, "If love is wrong, why does it feel like coming home?" "I saw this and realized something," Asher said. "We've both spent our lives asking permission to be loved, waiting to be chosen. But what if we stopped waiting?" He took her hand, held it against his chest. "What if we just chose each other?" Ivy let the tears fall. Not from sadness. From release. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes to you. Always to you." They kissed, but this time there was no hesitation, no past pulling them back. Just lips meeting in soft surrender. Breathless promises made without words. It was gentle, low. Like a storm that had finally passed. The following weeks bloomed with purpose. They worked side by side, designing the therapy center together. Ivy took the lead on structure and interior flow. Asher crafted the musical experience. Soundproof rooms, recording studios, open-air spaces with grand pianos tucked beneath trees. Their love wove through every corner of the project. Late nights turned into slow dances in unfinished halls. Lunch breaks became rehearsals for the ribbon-cutting ceremony. And one evening, Ivy found a surprise in the garden courtyard. A bench carved with the words, "Still and soft," for the woman who saw me first. She pressed her hand over her heart. This wasn't just a new chapter. It was a new story entirely. Then came opening day. The therapy center stood tall and welcoming, nestled on the edge of the lake where Asher had first kissed her. Media crews buzzed outside, donors mingled over champagne, and local artists performed soft jazz as guests toured the facility. Ivy wore a blush-pink jumpsuit, elegant but effortless, with a marigold tucked behind her ear. Asher spotted her across the atrium and couldn't stop smiling. "She's still the most breathtaking person in any room," he whispered to a colleague. And that was before she stepped onto the makeshift stage. "I want to thank everyone for believing in the vision," Ivy began, her voice steady. "This center is a testament to what happens when creativity, courage, and compassion come together." She paused, then glanced toward the piano. "And now, I'd like to welcome the man who helped me rediscover the music in my life. Partner. Friend. The heartbeat behind every note in this space. Asher Callahan." Asher walked onto the stage to light applause, adjusted the mic, then turned to Ivy before sitting at the piano. "I wasn't going to play today," he said, fingers hovering above the keys. "But this piece isn't just for this building. It's for someone who reminded me that broken things aren't useless. They're just waiting to be shaped into something more beautiful." The crowd hushed. He began to play. A delicate, emotional composition, echoes of the first melody Ivy ever heard him play from behind the music room door. But now it had grown richer, fuller, braver. It told a story of healing, of steps taken one at a time, of a love that defied shame, silence, and fear. Ivy stood off stage, hands pressed together, tears streaming. This wasn't just music. It was a proposal. Because when the final note faded and Asher rose, he walked to her, took both of her hands and reached into his pocket. Out came a pressed marigold, wrapped around a ring. "I don't have a father to ask. I don't have a rulebook to follow. I just have this heart, and it's been yours from the very first song," he said. "Marry me, Ivy Dane." She didn't hesitate. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." The room erupted in applause. But all they could hear was each other. 1 year later, the center had served over 400 patients. Ivy's designs were now being featured in architectural journals across the world. Asher released an album, Sketchbook Songs, inspired by Ivy's drawings. They moved into a restored brownstone near the center, filling it with laughter, piano keys, wildflowers, and love. And every Sunday, no matter what, they sat together in the garden. No pressure, no pretense, just quiet and truth, step by step, into each other's hearts. Forever. Would you risk it all for a love that heals? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more unforgettable love stories from Made of Love. The camera fades in on Ivy and Asher seated beneath the willow tree at the Music Therapy Center, the same place where they once danced around words and silence. Now they're just two souls, hands intertwined, laughter soft, the glow of the setting sun painting them gold. Ivy traces the veins of a pressed marigold tucked inside her sketchbook, glancing over at Asher. "Do you ever think about how close we were to never finding this?" she asks. Asher smiles, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "All the time. One wrong step, and we might have missed each other. But we didn't," she says quietly. "We didn't run. We didn't settle." He nods. "We just kept walking toward truth. Toward home." Their story wasn't perfect. It was filled with tension, judgment, fear, and longing that felt impossible to admit. But every step they took, even the missteps, led them closer to something unshakable, something real. A love not defined by timing or titles, but by truth. In the background, soft piano notes rise. The lullaby Asher once posted anonymously now reimagined into a duet he and Ivy composed together. Have you ever fallen for someone you knew you shouldn't, but your heart refused to listen? Would you walk away from comfort for the chance at real love, even if the world didn't understand? Let us know in the comments. We'd love to hear your stories. Red heart. And if this romance moved you, please give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to Made of Love, and hit that bell so you never miss another story that tugs your heartstrings. Because love isn't always easy. Sometimes it's complicated. Sometimes it's slow. But when it's real, you feel it, step by step, into your heart. Thank you for watching. Until next time, stay in love, stay curious, and remember, the most beautiful stories are the ones we never saw coming. True love isn't always instant or easy. It's often a slow journey through vulnerability, fear, and truth, but each step brings us closer to the kind of connection that heals and transforms us.